Letterkenny sits on a hillside overlooking Loch Swilly, the market and post town of the 19th century gazetteer, little changed, surrounded as then by a highly romantic, broken and rocky country, interspersed with woods and domains, and blending at certain points with a magnificent general landscape of a large part of Loch Swilly and its mountain screens. The surrounding countryside, for which Letterkenny, by reason of its very geographic location, has been the obvious market centre. And Letterkenny, in a perhaps complacent sort of way, has benefited from the relative agricultural prosperity which surrounds it, a prosperity built on both tillage and cattle. To date, agriculture has been the underpinning holding the economic life of the town together. That, and in spite of Lifford's claims to them, a gradual growth in the administrative services housed in Letterkenny. Once Letterkenny was a thriving port. Now the port, its operation severely hampered by tidal conditions, is 3 miles down Loch Swilly. While the ships still call there, the old River Swilly channel lies silted up between uncared for, untidy, mud-laden banks. Once, too, Letterkenny was a railhead, one of the few towns in Ireland which were actually served by competitive networks. From the 1880s until just over 20 years ago, it was linked to Derry and northwards to the communities of Inishowen by the narrow gauge services of the Londonderry and Loch Swilly Railway. A spectacular piece of line linked it to Burtonport and the communities of northwest Donegal. And another 3-foot gauge system, the most extensive in Ireland, that of the County Donegal Railway, linked Letterkenny with Strabane and Derry, and southwards to Stranorla, Glentees, Donegal Town, down to Ballyshannon. Today, though, Letterkenny's rare status symbols, 2 stations beside each other, each with its own station master, are overgrown memories. The last narrow-gauge locomotive, or railcar, long departed. But if once rich in rail services, Letterkenny has always lacked any real industrial growth. What there is has been traditionally Protestant-owned, paternalistic, and in the past run by owners resolutely opposed to trade unionism. Letterkenny's dependence on its agricultural hinterland is reflected in the Donegal dairy products complex at Ballyrane. Here, a modern food processing plant prepares the products of the rich surrounding land for export. But like all agriculturally based industry, it's known uncertainty. The real lack of industrial tradition in Letterkenny, however, seems underlined by a never-occupied advance factory. The strategic location of the town, though, at the top of Loch Swilly, has favoured its growth as an administrative centre. While Lifford, on the border, remains nominally the administrative capital of County Donegal, banking, postal and other services have been increasingly concentrated in Letterkenny. And its proliferation of public houses and cafes underline another of the town's roles, that of a rabble or human hiring fair town, a town into which the young, able-bodied men of West Donegal flocked on their way to labour on farms as far away as Scotland, a legacy which has not endeared Letterkenny to the people of West Donegal, the people of Gweedore, Falcarra, Annagree, Dunfanaghy, and a host of smaller communities. Letterkenny, originally a planter town, is the cathedral town of the Diocese of Raphoe. From the grounds of St Eunan's Roman Catholic Cathedral, the statue of Cardinal O'Donnell, a former primate of Ireland, looks across at the local Church of Ireland parish church. The people who attend cathedral or church, the denominationally mixed 5,000 inhabitants of Letterkenny, live in apparent harmony, their relationship seemingly undisturbed by events a few miles away across the border in Northern Ireland. A Buchanan report in 1968 may have spelled out the need for new housing and services as important to the town's future, but to date there seems to have been little urgency in approaching the task. The pace of house building, though, if somewhat lethargic, appears to date to have met the requirements of a population which, in the last census period, showed a marginal increase. There are suggestions that people have to wait for houses, but the real question may be whether, while catering for immediate demands, Letterkenny has been far-sighted enough in anticipating probable future demands, and that's not a question confined to Letterkenny. How then has the town been equipping itself for the future? Most obviously, it's the possessor of a brand new regional technical college named after the late Donogh O'Malley. There are criticisms, suggestions that it may be an expensive mistake, but what's it setting out to do?
The college, for the first time, provides opportunities in third level education for students in Donegal who hitherto have been denied these opportunities. The fact of its siting in Letterkenny is, indeed, the nature of Donegal, the geographical nature of Donegal, means that wherever a regional college would be sited, there would be problems, attendant problems of transporting, of students finding transport to and from the college, because it is a far-flung county. And so Letterkenny is no better or worse, perhaps, from that point of view than any of the others, than any of the other possible sites for the college. However, Letterkenny, as you may know, is on the threshold of expansion industrially and in other ways, and perhaps for those reasons it was that Letterkenny was chosen. It being a college of technology, in a way, it has to serve the needs of industrialists. That is perhaps the chief raison d'etre of any regional college. But in the wider sphere of education, it has, of course, an important role to play in helping students from the region to become well-integrated members of society.
The relatively small number of students compared to the large, highly qualified staff, however, compound fears that the college may be an educational white elephant.
I have heard comments of that nature, but I think that the successes of the students of the regional college in Letterkenny perhaps have allayed some of the fears that perhaps the college was a white elephant. One must remember that if you're talking about a well-rounded education as one might expect to get in a university, we are different and quite different from universities. There is much more intensive teaching in colleges such as this than one would expect to find in a university situation. For example, class contact hours are very much more demanding than in universities, and therefore we're talking really about two totally different types of education.
You know, we differ quite a lot from the universities. I'm not saying either that we shouldn't be accountable for what we do, or we shouldn't have to answer for what we do. But I think that you know, our function mightn't be solely teaching. There's a lot of developmental work, public relations work to be done, especially in Donegal, in order to sell courses. And this sort of time we're not allowed anything for this. Is just extra. We're not allowed anything for this.
The college staff represents an influx of new blood and ideas into a highly conservative community. What difficulties have they faced in adjusting to Letterkenny?
There is one thing which is a source of annoyance to us, is that we've got no representation either on the board of management of the college, on the local VEC, and very often the teachers are criticised, especially in the VEC, the Vocational Education Committee. Very often this criticism is unjustified, and I feel personally that if we had representatives there, then we could put our case. And by the way, also these meetings of the Vocational Education Committee are widely reported in the press, so very often this might mean that a concept of the teachers might be developed within the community, which would be incorrect as a result of sort of criticisms at these meetings. Also, I feel, obviously, on our Board of Management, the discussions at the Board of Management aren't made public, but I feel anyway that we should have representation there. I would also like to, I feel that the structure in the present college is possibly too rigid. I would feel that it doesn't allow each teacher enough scope to develop his particular area, and I think teachers, if the colleges are to succeed, I think that greater scope would have to be given to each teacher within the structure.
The real role of the Regional Technical College may remain uncertain, but life in Letterkenny continues apparently unchanged. The traffic comes and goes down the straggling main street with its eccentric buildings and even eccentric spellings. While its neighbouring urban communities just across the border, Derry and Strabane, have suffered some of the worst scars of the northern conflict, Letterkenny's shopkeepers have to some extent benefited. Many of the County Donegal people who regularly crossed the border to shop in the north before the Troubles now consider it more prudent, as the bombs go off, to shop in the south, and Letterkenny has benefited in consequence. But while the complacent pattern of life in Letterkenny seems unaltered today, the town faces a development which may alter radically the way of life it's known. For months now, work has been forging ahead on an industrial project unprecedented in a town of no real industrial tradition. At a cost of over £25 million, the giant Courtaulds Group is setting up a plant intended to employ 720 people, producing 10,000 tonnes a year of textured polyester filament yarn. But how well equipped is Letterkenny to meet the challenge of coping with this new industry? When it's completed, the plant will require 28 senior staff, about 57 junior staff, not to mention 50 skilled maintenance workers. Obviously, and it's reflected by the fact that particularly in skilled categories, many of those involved in building the factory come from elsewhere, including the north, most of these people will be outsiders. At full production too, the plant will employ 570 operatives, about 75 of them women. And in a town with high but not drastic unemployment, this means that the company will either have to recruit much of its labour force from the surrounding countryside or attract outsiders to live in Letterkenny. And in an area with no real tradition of industry, Courtaulds face the problem of introducing 2/3 of their labour force to what, for them, will be the novelty of continuous shift work. Quite apart from Courtaulds' ability to assemble the necessary workforce, the project raises enormous questions about Letterkenny's ability to cater for it. The company is apparently confident that the problems can be overcome, that everything will work out as planned. But in an era of global industrial recession, and given the obvious problems which they face in Letterkenny, how big a gamble are Courtaulds taking? How brave are they being? Director and General Manager of the new plant, Ken Worrell.
It's always a brave decision to spend something over £20 million on a plant. I don't think it's any more brave than to take it anywhere else. There's a lot of inherent basic skill, I think, in the people of Donegal. I'm sure they can be trained, and that's what we're banking on.
His future employees, though, have never had any experience of the continuous process with shift work which will be involved in Letterkenny. Does Ken Worrell foresee problems on this score?
Yes, I think one of the biggest problems that we're likely to have is not so much training people, which is relatively easy. It's a question of time and patience. It's a question of the discipline of working on a big factory and working shifts, which, as you say, are quite alien to anything they've experienced before. But it can be done and has been done elsewhere, and I don't see it as an insurmountable problem.
Yes, it's certainly new. Shift work, particularly 3 and 4 shift working, is reasonably new in Donegal, and particularly in Letterkenny. But I imagine that, in this county there are so many small farmers who might well have a bit of land and who might well be quite anxious to work on a 4-day, 40-hour week with the extra time at the weekend to do some work at home. I wouldn't envisage any very special problems because of this.
George Hunter, Irish Transport and General Workers Union District Secretary, with a modest office set up because of the Courtaulds development. Does he foresee problems because of the lack of local industrial tradition?
Well, what you say is quite true. It didn't have this kind of industrial tradition. But nevertheless, the people in Letterkenny are tremendously conscious of the trade union movement, and they're very conscious of trade unionism. And the very fact that the Irish Transport and General Workers Union have come down here to Letterkenny and have opened an office will be a great contributory factor in helping us to develop this awareness of the trade union movement, and indeed this awareness of industrialism generally. There are one or two non-union houses in Letterkenny. The reasons are historical. I think that in one case there is a religious problem, and I believe that the workers there feel that they are getting what they would describe as the trade union writ because they are operating under a joint labour committee. Of course, what they don't realise is that if there were no trade unions, there would be no trade union writ for them to get.
But apart from the workforce, how does Ken Worrell hope to attract the required managerial staff, most of them working at present in British and Northern Ireland plants? How does he get them to come to Letterkenny?
Well, we first of all select who would like to come, because the formation of the initial team, the senior team, is very important indeed. And I do emphasise they have got to form part of a team. We select what we think are the best and most competent people in their particular fields that we have available, and who we think are capable of being promoted. And then we discuss with them the possibility of coming over to Donegal and explain to them the type of plant and the type of job. We then make arrangements, if they're willing, for them to come over and have a look around the district and the area. And usually somebody's with